Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. 2 years ago, my guest warned that Western hesitation and incoherence over Syria would hand a success to Russia and Iran. Now, Moscow has intervened directly in the Syrian conflict, helping President Bashar al-Assad's depleted army and effectively aiding Iran's ally Hezbollah, which has been overstretched in Syria. Today, I'd like to welcome General Paul Vallely. He had a distinguished career in the US Army for more than 3 decades, retiring in 1991. He's the founder and chairman of the Stand Up America Project and an outspoken critic of the Obama administration. General Vallely, thank you for being my guest on the program.
Thank you, Armin. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Mon plaisir.
If you were now still on active service, what would you be recommending to the US government in response to the Russian airstrikes?
Well, that's a great question. If I was on active duty right now, I would ensure, first of all, that we have a strategy, a coherent strategy for dealing with all of the Middle East, and particularly with Syria. And as you may know, I was the only senior officer that actually went inside Syria in 2013 and vetted the groups there on the ground and presented that report to our Congress and to our government, to which groups they should support. So trying not to reflect back, if I was on active duty now, I would continue to support the eyes and the soldiers on the ground that will be the most effective, and that would be the Kurds and the Free Syrian Army.
Well, a lot of people are now saying in the West that the Free Syrian Army no longer exists and the Kurds are far away in the north, far away from Damascus. You don't really have an effective ally on the ground where this fighting is happening now, that's to say in Idlib province.
No, actually we do. The Free Syrian Army, and of course I've met with over 20 of the generals and senior ministers that left the Assad government over the last 3 to 4 years, and so they do exist. Now, many of them are working out of Jordan, out of Turkey. Some are active even in Latakia, a general that I've been working with. No, they're there, but they need assistance. The Free Syrian Army has always been the one. And they told me, a young Syrian major, he said, we're seeking freedom from the tyrannical government. And that's what it's all about. So I think from the standpoint of militarily, there's a lot of other things that have to occur rather than just the military solution on the ground.
We'll get back to the broader political dimension, but just on the military aspect, if the FSA still exists, why can it not actually be more effective? I mean, it's not simply a question of resources, is it?
Oh, it's really a question of resources, and it has been. You know, we have not supported, and I say we, even the Europeans and the other Arab nations have not really got behind the pure freedom fighters over there, which is the Free Syrian Army, and they're on the ground. They're spread throughout Syria, and I think with the proper support, with a ceasefire, and you know, part of my plan is to unite the Syrian army into a national army, which includes the Free Syrian Army and the current Syrian people. But certain things have to happen in place, which we can talk about before that happens.
But the problem is that you have allies, let's say the US has allies, that is backing other groups, Islamist rebels, and that is making this whole coalition basically nonsensical, isn't it?
Well, it's so confusing because we don't send the right signals to the people we really should be supporting on the ground. I get reports every day from inside Syria from our network in there. And so that's why, you know, when I go on national television or radio, they say, well, how do you know all of those things? Well, I have eyes on the ground that work with me to tell me. Send me pictures. Send me what's happening in Aleppo, what's happening in Homs, what's happening in Latakia, Tartus. And so we track that every day at Stand Up America and our legacy group. And that's another group that we have that we actually advise now the presidential candidates on a policy in the Middle East that looks at today and tomorrow, not the past. So that's where I'm at, Armin, looking at today and tomorrow.
What about this train and equip program, which has now formally been ended by the Pentagon? Do you think there's a possibility of doing something new, or have your former allies, shall we say, in Syria totally lost confidence now, and it's basically no way to go forward?
Well, certainly they've lost confidence. And, of course, any time that you don't get the support you need to further your goals, no, but they're still there. There's a way we can do that. If Turkey would assist the project, Jordan to some degree. I can't say what's going to happen in Iraq. I doubt if they'll do anything because their hands are full just trying to fight ISIS and Anbar and looking at some kind of tactical operation that'll take Mosul back. So that's a whole different situation. But inside Syria, we can effectively supply the Free Syrian Army, not to really conduct more welfare, but to protect themselves. Some of the TOW missiles they have now are from the Free Syrian Army that they did get a few, and they're shooting down, as you know, some of the Russian helicopters.
But sure, I mean, how can you supply them when you've now got the Russian Air Force flying?
Well, that takes, as one of our presidential candidates said, Donald Trump, we have to make a deal. And so,
and that deal would mean, of course, Assad stays in power, because there's no way Russia can accept regime change in Syria. It can't possibly.
I think it can.
How?
I think Putin will make a deal, and Putin can become a real hero in this.
Really, how?
But he's got to have Assad removed, retire, go to a Dachau in Russia or whatever. So if you talk directly to the day and tomorrow, and also it'll solve the European refugee program. Or issue, I should say. But you have to deal one-on-one.
But let's be realistic. The Russians have basically lost Gaddafi. They've lost Saddam Hussein. They're not going to allow another ally in the Arab world to be toppled in favor of Western interests, basically.
No, don't look at it that way. In other words, what we were talking about earlier, don't look through the political prism for solutions. Look through the reality prism. Look at what can be done in a positive way to resettle Syrians back into their country in a secure area. But all will work if Putin would take the initiative to say, Assad, it's time for you to go. Listen, we have a new government coming into America. Putin's gone through government. So at some point in time, governments has to change for the benefit of the people. And that's what we're talking about.
So what's plan B if he doesn't say Assad has to go?
It's going to get worse for the Russians. I mean, we're looking for really a holy war conflict in the Middle East.
But it's also going to get much worse for the Free Syrian Army, or what?
It's going to get worse for all of them. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
For the refugees.
Yes. More refugees into Europe. So let's look at this commonsensical. Let's look and see what the solutions are.
And on that, you've put forward on your European tour a plan to reunify Syria.
Right.
But isn't actually a partition of Syria already a reality that maybe is not legally the case, but in reality on the ground it's already?
Well, I think you're right, Armin. It looks like that.
Yeah.
But again, when I look to what I call the new Syria, with a whole resettlement program, economic development, those kinds of things will pull the Syrians back if their land is secure. They want to go back to their towns and villages. They don't want to stay in Europe for the most part. How do we get them there? Putin can be a hero again. And the other Europeans. I think the French are a very important part of this whole plan if we do it right in the Middle East and do it for Syria.
One thing that Russia looks at, it's not just the West versus Russia, but also the objective chaos in Libya and how that experiment, if you will, in political and social engineering, at least so far, hasn't worked out very well. And that was a similar blueprint for trying to bring all Libyan forces together. The Russians look at that and say, well, do you really want the same in Syria? Perhaps even more difficult, more dangerous, more chaotic than Libya is now.
Well, that was a whole different situation. You know, I co-founded the Benghazi Citizens Commission. We've studied in detail what happened in Libya, for sure, and we've given that to Trey Gowdy in the United States. But that was a gun-running operation, basically, that was happening. And, you know, some of the arms were shipped up to Turkey that were supposed to go to Syria in certain elements. And Turkey ended up taking about 70% for themselves on that, as I understand it. So Turkey can do a lot to play in this thing. And again, doing the right thing for the Syrian people. And if we get the word out to the Syrian people that we have a plan that will reunite Syria, but with a new government in place, that is a positive and that is a must for anything to happen.
Sorry to insist, but, you know, this plan for a new Syria is posited on a condition that Russia will not accept. So we still come back
We don't know that.
It's been proposed to Russia many times by John Kerry to relinquish support for Assad.
Listen, I can deal with Putin and the Russians better than Kerry can, believe me. They have more confidence. Not that I know it all, but I've studied it so much and have been part of this whole thing for so many years right now that I know that the Russians are pragmatic in many ways, but Russia controls the card table right now. So it's got to be put to Putin that he can change the whole Middle East for him, for Russia, for the rest of the countries, for the resettlement, rather than trying to direct it into a greater military conflict, which will be a disaster.
Beyond offering him this idea that he can be a hero, as you put it, is there anything a little bit more concrete in terms of, let's say, geopolitical power interest that you could offer Putin that might help to persuade it?
See, it comes back again to power and money and energy in the Middle East a lot. And, you know, Qatar wants to build that pipeline across Syria into the Mediterranean. One of the key things that the Russians and Putin enjoy is controlling energy to a great degree, as Europe knows. So you could put some things out there in the economic development program. If they want an oil pipeline, if it's going to benefit everybody, then there's a lot of things in the future for the Russians to benefit by. They're not going to benefit by war, though.
Right, so you put all those things on the table.
Yes.
We have to end it there. I'm so sorry we've run out of time. Many thanks, retired General Paul Vallely. That's all we have time for on the interview.